Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And welcome to the month of February, everybody. And we've got a unit on culture to talk about today. It's about bathhouses. And hey, you might take yourself a hot spring bath during the holidays.
I know it's something a lot of my Taiwanese friends love to do. They love to book into a hotel and that has a hot spring bath inside or nearby because that's something that really refreshes them and makes them feel, I don't know, just reinvigorated for a new year. I have never... Actually, that's not true. I have gone once to a hot spring, Tom. It was in Beitou, and it was one of those sulfur-smelling hot springs. Sulfur is kind of a nasty smell. It smells like rotten eggs to me. But it was really comfortable. I like going if the weather's cool enough, but... I'm not someone who goes a lot to hot springs. I know that a lot of people, my father used to love hot springs. So maybe it's something that helps a lot of people who have aches and pains in their bodies.
Yeah, there are various ways to do it, of course. You can rent a private room, you can go to a public bath, etc., etc. The last time I went to a hot spring was, maybe last year. I went to Jiaoxi, and in downtown Jiaoxi there's a place where you can soak your feet.
Oh, nice.
And a couple of municipal pools there for free. They're very popular, so lots of people like to go there as well. But we're actually talking about bathhouses in the past where people actually went to bathe, whereas everybody nowadays bathes at home if you need to take a shower or something like that. But back in the old days in the Roman Empire and in Japan, they relied on bathhouses, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get into it, everybody. Bathing back through time. Let's read the entire contents of today's lesson now one time.
Whether you use steam, oil, sand, or just plain old soap and water, the message is simple. If you want to get clean, take a bath. Other reasons for bathing could be medical, religious, or simply because it feels delightful. Nowadays, we usually just take a shower or bath at home. But before this luxury was widely available, people did things differently. Greek and Roman bathhouses were huge and elaborately decorated with works of art. Different rooms were used for hot and cold pools, steam bathing, and massages. Separate chambers were allocated to men and women. As this was before the invention of soap, people would cover themselves in perfumed oil and then have a slave scrape it off, taking the day's dirt with it. Fascinating remains of Roman baths can be found in Bath, a town in southwest England, where one can taste the spring waters still fed into the baths by 2,000-year-old pipes. Public bathing was a social experience, and a lot of mingling, business, and political discussion went on in the bathhouses. However, baths went out of fashion in the Middle Ages. For one thing, Europe was cursed by contagious plagues that spread easily via public bathwater. For another, Christian religious leaders criticized the practice. Many Christians of this time contended that true believers should resist such enjoyable activities as bathing in order to become closer to God. It would not be until the late 18th century that ideas started to change. Improved medical science and better water distribution made bathing a daily exercise once more, and public baths and spas began to reappear.
Okay, everybody, let's discuss the contents of today's lesson. We're bathing back through time. Of course, when you bathe, you're washing your body, and there are basically two ways to do that. You can take a bath, or you can take a shower. Taking a shower is quicker, and I believe it uses less water, but sometimes taking a bath is nice, especially in the winter, when you can just lie in nice warm water and just relax for a little while. And yes, indeed, indeed, sometimes bathing can be quite a pleasurable experience. So let's talk about the history of bathing, whether you use steam, oil, sand, or just plain old soap and water. The message is simple. If you want to get clean, take a bath. So I guess these are different ways you can actually clean yourself by using steam. Yeah, I guess you can take a steam bath. I guess you can rub oil all over your body. That's one way. I never heard of rubbing sand all over your body, but I suppose it would work. It's kind of abrasive, right? Like a brush?
Actually, women use a lot of like gritty products to smooth their skin. So yeah, I mean, we don't actually use sand, but sometimes people will add sugar to some of their soaps to kind of scrape the dead skin off their skin. You know, the first layer. Yeah, kind of weird, huh?
Well, no, it makes sense there.
I don't think guys do it. Yeah, the women do it.
Yeah, well, there are some things that are kind of like sandpaper that people can use to scrub their skin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then for me, I just take a bar of soap and just rub it over my body very vigorously. So maybe I should consider using a scrub brush or something like that. I don't know. But these are different ways to bathe yourself. And whether you use these things, well, the message is simple. If you want to get clean, take a bath. So this is a common pattern here, whether it's this or whether it's that. Something still is true. So it doesn't really matter what you use. The point is you want to get clean, and therefore you should take a bath.
Now, of course, there are other reasons for bathing. It could be you have a medical reason or religious, or simply because it feels delightful. Medical, maybe you have injured some part of your body. You're going to want to bathe that area. Make sure it's all clean. That hurts sometimes. If you've scraped your knee or maybe cut yourself, it hurts when you first put that water on, but you have to clean out the wound. Religious, it might be that they're referring to baptisms, which are often they include water, whether someone's fully immersed in water or water sprinkled on someone's head. Or maybe you just take a bath because it feels great. And this is my sister. She could not believe it when I first told her I didn't have a bathtub in Taiwan. She thought, how do you live? She loves her baths. She will fill her bathtub up and read a book in there. So sometimes people like to take baths because they feel delightful. Just makes you feel great. It's something that brings you a lot of happiness. So there are lots of reasons for bathing.
Right. Delight, of course, is the noun, and then here we've got an adjective. Delightful. It is a delightful experience to take a bath. And nowadays, we usually just take a shower or we just take a bath at home. But before this luxury was widely available, people did things differently. So I guess we can consider having a bath at home or a shower at home a luxury, something that most people don't have. A luxury, of course, is something extra that someone might have that most other people don't. We do have luxury items such as expensive watches and luxury cars and stuff like that. Most of us don't need those things, but if you you run around with those kind of people and you're kind of under pressure to show off as well, you might buy a luxury car. Although there I'm using the word luxury as an adjective, but here luxury is being used as a noun. It's just something that is really extra special that you don't necessarily need, but it's great if you have it.
Now, that was in the olden times, so we're very grateful that bathing is sort of ordinary and common today, that's for sure. So going back in history, we're going to go look at the Greek and Roman bathhouses first. They were huge and elaborately decorated with works of art. So it was almost like going to a museum. It was so beautiful. Now, if something's elaborately decorated, it's just very, very fancy. They're probably spending a lot of money if they're doing something elaborately. You could say that some of the nicest homes on the earth have elaborate furnishings. Now, elaborately is the adverb, so you'd use it with a verb, but elaborate would be the adjective form. So if something's elaborate or done elaborately, a lot of time and usually money is involved with this. So it sounds like their bathhouses were quite beautiful. They had different rooms. Some were used for hot pools, some were cold pools. I know some people who like to go into a sauna and then jump into a pool of cold water. which is kind of shocking to the system. They say it's good for you. I don't know. There were also rooms for steam bathing. They could do steam back then. And of course, massages, which are still popular today.
And they might also have the sauna, which is that hot room that's really dry there. That's probably part of the process of going to a bathhouse. But, of course, if you lived in Greek and Roman times, you had this kind of luxury. You went to a bathhouse, and it was elaborately decorated with paintings and sculptures and stuff like that. And, of course, different rooms had different purposes. Separate chambers or separate rooms were allocated to men and women. So here, allocate just means it's given to you. You get a portion of that sort of thing. During wartime, of course, we need to ration things. So people will be allocated a certain amount of gasoline, cooking oil, rice, stuff like that. And in this particular case, they had separate rooms for men and women.
Now, this was before they had actually invented soap. So people would cover themselves in perfumed oil that had a strong fragrance to it. And then they would have a slave, someone who worked for other people and had no freedom. They would have that slave scrape it off. If you scrape something off, you take off that top layer of something. So that's how they would do it. People must have smelled very strongly back in the day. So that would take the day's dirt off as they scraped that perfume oil off someone's body. A very different process, of course, than what we have today.
It sort of reminds me of those things that you stick on your nose and you leave it there for a little while and then you peel it off.
Those masks, yeah.
And then it takes dirt out of your pores or something like that. So I suppose it's a similar process here when you have the oil on your body and then the slave will scrape it off just like we have to scrape snow off our windshields when it snows in northern climates. And, of course, that would take the dirt with it. And, yes, indeed, we'll continue talking about Roman and Greek bathhouses and other kinds of bathhouses in just a second, but we're going to take a break now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们今天跟明天要带大家去泡澡放松一下哦。没有啦，我们是要带大家认识一下浴场文化。其实啊，洗澡这件事情本来就是保持干净嘛，那就洗澡。当然这个是洗澡啊或泡澡的第一个原因，它出现在第一段的第一句。当然还有一些其他的原因啊，比如说像医学、宗教的一些理由，或者是仅仅是因为洗澡其实是很开心的。那么在第一段的第二句，我们看到 other reasons。其实当我们在说列举的时候啊，这个 other 是形容词，它指的是其他的，而且这个其他的呢，后面会加复数名词哦。好，那不管到底是 take a shower 淋浴啦，或 take a bath 或者是所谓的沐浴，其实在古代的时候大家的做法都不太一样。所以接下来我们看到第二段呢，带我们先往西方走。像以前希腊跟罗马的浴场其实是很大的，而且呢都有精心装饰哦。用什么装饰呢？用艺术品 works of art。 在第二段第一句最后面出现所谓的艺术品works of art。 那当然会有冷水池啊，或者是热水池啊，甚至是蒸汽浴、按摩等等，使用不同的房间，男女是分开的。不过因为当时啊是在肥皂发明之前，所以大家到底要怎么清洁呢？大家是把身体啊用一些香氛精油，然后还有一些沙土，然后请一个奴隶呢把身上的这些东西刮走，就带走当天的污垢。我们特别注意一下第二段第四句的地方。首先，这个第四句的第一个单字 as， 它是连接词，在这里根据文意去推断，它是 because 的意思。我们曾经说过，如果 as 当连接词的时候，可能代表原因 because， 表示时间 when， 或者它有如同、好像，表示比喻的意思。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about bathing back through time. So we've returned to times in the past, ancient days. We're talking about Greek and Roman bathhouses. They were quite big and they were very fancy. They were elaborately decorated And they even had works of art in them, which is interesting because, if a room has a lot of water in it, I tend not to put very precious things inside that room because I'm afraid the water will damage them. But they had works of art around, probably had more sculptures back then because that's what they tended to do. Now, they had different rooms also, and some had hot pools, some had cold pools. They had steam bathing. Tom suggested they probably had saunas as well, which is very popular even today, in massages. They had different chambers. A chamber is just an enclosed space. Those chambers were allocated or divvied up, we'll sometimes say, or just separate or distributed to men and women. Now, this was before they had invented soap. If you can imagine, there was a time in history when we didn't have soap. I'm so glad we have soap now. People would cover themselves in really perfumed oil, very strong oil. And then because they had slaves back then, they would have the slaves scrape the oil off and that would take the dirt with it. So if you want to see some remains of some of those old Roman baths, you can actually go to a town in southwest England called Bath. Because of their accent, they don't say bath like Americans. They actually pronounce it Bath. I would encourage you, if you're in England, to take that day trip out there. It's awfully fun. I went out there because that's a famous tourist spot for people who love Jane Austen as an author. She lived out there for a while in her life. And so there's a Jane Austen museum in Bath. So that's some place that still has the old remains of Roman baths. And they actually still have spring waters that go through these very old pipes, 2,000-year-old pipes, that you can then go and see.
I hope those pipes are not lead pipes, but I understand that's what brought down the Roman Empire because they used a lot of lead in their dishes and stuff like that. At least that's a theory.
Kill people, huh?
I guess so.
Wow.
It's not good for your body, but in any case, I guess those pipes are still working in the town of Bath in southwestern England. Now, let's move on now to the next paragraph. It says, public bathing was a social experience, and a lot of mingling, business, and political discussion went on in the bathhouses. Okay, so yes, indeed, you did not only go to a public bathhouse to take a bath, but you also went there to socialize. It was a social experience. You got to mingle a lot, so there was a lot of mingling, which means you meet new people, you kind of move around, meet somebody here. Nice meeting you. I'm going to go talk to this person now.
Yeah.
If you go to parties in Western countries, of course, there's a lot of mingling going on. They were also discussing business, and they were discussing politics as well. What do you think of the Green Party? Well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I like them as much as I like the Blue Party. Oh, how can you say that? I like the Pink Party. What about the Purple Party? Etc. They were discussing political topics of the day.
Kind of sounds like cocktail parties that people have nowadays. When you mingle, as Tom said, you should learn this word, especially if you're going into business. A lot of people will be standing with a drink in their hand and talking in a small group and then moving on. That they're just mingling. So a lot of discussion goes on at times like this. Nowadays, a lot of people do a lot of business and political discussion out on the golf courses. But back then, public bathing was a social experience, which is really weird to think about. So it says here, however, but even though that's true, baths went out of fashion in the Middle Ages. Middle Ages started in the 1400s. So if something's out of fashion, it's no longer popular with most people. We talk about things being in fashion and out of fashion, or in style or out of style. They're interchangeable. You can use any of those. So if something's out of fashion, most people think it's kind of old and something that's not really cool anymore. So you don't want to do things that are out of fashion or wear something that's out of fashion. So out of fashion, in style, out of style can be used for not just clothes and things that we wear, but activities that we do as well.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we used to go roller skating at roller skating rinks, you know. They were quite popular then.
Yeah, they were when we were young.
Yeah, but now they're out of fashion, okay? It's just kind of passed by. You can't find a roller skating rink anywhere anymore. They all closed, so that went out of fashion. Young people are doing different sorts of things now. And yes, baths went out of fashion in the Middle Ages. For one thing, Europe was cursed by contagious plagues that spread easily via public bathwater. Okay, so that's one reason why baths went out of fashion, why they went out of style, was because Europe had these nasty diseases like the Black Plague and stuff like that. Europe was cursed by contagious plagues. If you're cursed by something or cursed with something, that means something bad happens to you. It seems like magic. Maybe someone has put a curse on you. Maybe the devil is trying to get your soul or something like that, but you've been cursed by something. And in this case, Europe was cursed with contagious plagues, and contagious means they spread easily, just like COVID-19.
Yeah. Contagious spreads from people to people or people to animal and vice versa. Yeah, so that doesn't sound like a very safe place to be. Back then, they didn't understand much about science, though, so they were probably slow to figure out that this was kind of an unsafe place to be. So via, this word via or via, sometimes people pronounce it via, just means through or by this particular way. So for another, Christian leaders would often criticize the practice. If you criticize something, you say something that shouldn't be done, you disagree with it, you find fault with it, you find problems with it. So they were criticizing the practice because some of these leaders contended or believed or argued that true believers should resist such enjoyable activities as bathing. Nowadays, at least in my church, we believe that life is a pursuit of happiness and joy. So, I think that they were a little tough back then. So if you criticize someone, remember, it's very negative comments that you're making towards someone. It could be constructive criticism. Criticism is the noun form of the verb to criticize. Constructive criticism means comments that will help you improve in the future. But if someone's just criticizing you and they're not eager to help you improve, they're being negative towards you. They're making comments towards you that probably hurt. Now, contend is another word you can use for arguing a certain point that you believe in. So you can contend that something's true or argue that something's true. Those are both very good words. Contend is pretty much used more in written English rather than spoken, but it's a really good word to become familiar with. So they contended that true believers, good Christians, should resist or avoid enjoyable activities. That was the only way to become closer to God. Boy, I don't believe that at all, but go ahead, Tom.
Sounds pretty weird. You think that God would like you to be clean and smell good.
And be happy.
Yeah, what kind of person wants to go before God smelling like a cesspool or something like that?
Dirty.
So that sounds kind of illogical. But let's move on now to the next paragraph here. It says, it would not be until the late 18th century that ideas started to change. So we're moving out of the Middle Ages of the 1400s and the 1500s, and now we're in the 18th century, which is the 1700s, and ideas started to change. Improved medical science and better water distribution made bathing a daily exercise once more, and public baths and spas began to reappear. Spas, I believe, or at least that word, I think, comes from Finland, actually. So they were into that at the time as well. So we've got better medical science. They were able to stop the spread of diseases, and they could distribute water better with public plumbing and things like that. Distribution just talks about moving things throughout a society. If you're a company, you want to have good distribution so you can move your product all around the place.
Yeah, thank goodness science taught us that if we were clean, we'd have a better chance of staying healthy. Germs love dirt. I always think about that when I think about wanting to wash my hands. We know that washing our hands is very important, but keeping our bodies clean is as well. Well, this is just day one of our culture unit, guys. We're going to be talking about bathing again in our next program, and this time we're going to go off to our neighboring country of Japan. We hope you'll join us then, but first, guys, before we do that, we're going to listen one more time to our Chinese teacher.
那么其实啊，在英国的西南部有一个小镇巴斯啊，就可以找到罗马浴场的名人遗迹哦。而且在那边啊，大家可以体验到仍然具有2000年历史的水管注入浴场的泉水。我们来看一下第二段第5句这个地方。首先我们注意到第2个单字 remain 如果当动词就有仍然维持的意思，可是 remains 注意复数横用复数，它可以当名词哦，指的是遗迹的意思。那这样子的一个迷人遗迹在哪里呢？就是在巴斯这个小镇。好，我们在句子的逗点之后看到一个 where 到句尾补充说明的关系子句，这里的 where 指的是在巴斯这个城镇当中，大家可以体验到2000年前这样子的一个沐浴文化。好，那当然公共的沐浴是一种社交体验啊，像大量的交际、商业跟政治讨论其实都会在浴场举行。那么但是呢，浴场到了中世纪之后啊就过时了，也就是到了中世纪之后呢，大家都不这么喜欢一起洗澡了。什么原因呢？接下来我们看到2个原因。第一个原因在第3段第3句前面 for one thing， 这里可以特别把它框起来。通常我们说 for one thing 的时候，特别指的就是其中一个原因，而且我们会预期句子接下来还会再谈到另外一个原因，所以在同样这一段的第4句，一开始我们看到的是 for another。For another 指的就是另外一个原因。当然，如果我们在列举当中没有看到定冠词 the 的，就表示没有列举完毕。什么原因呢？除了第一个原因之外，还有另一个原因还没有列举完毕。好，那么知道了这2个原因之后呢，我们回过头来还是看同样这一段第3句。我们刚说第一个原因啊，是因为欧洲当时有传染病。这个瘟疫呢，危害大家的健康，而且瘟疫其实很容易透过公共的洗澡水来传播，所以当时的沐浴文化就这么慢慢的消退了。不过在这句当中有一个限定用法的关系子句，关系子句的先行词是 contagious plagues， 可以把它画起来。那么关系子句从 that 一直到句尾的地方。那么另外一个原因，就是因为基督教的这个宗教领袖呢，就有批评这样的惯例，因为在当时那个时代啊，有许多的基督徒，他们都声称真正的信仰是应该要抵制像沐浴这样的享乐活动。好，我们来看一下同样第3段这个第5句的地方，首先特别注意一下Contended 这个动词后面从 that 一直到句尾这里的 that， 它是一个没有意义功能性的连接词，连接的是 contended 后面的一个受词。在受词当中，我们看到2个字 such as， 可以把它抓出来，可是这里的 such as 是分开的耶。原本我们习惯的 such as， 比如说是连在一起的，通常都是用来列举具体的人事物，但是如果分开的话，可以翻成 such 这样的什么什么东西，后面的 as 就把它翻成是像什么一般，回过头来这样的什么什么东西。所以句子我们这里再看 such enjoyable activities as bathing， 像是先看后面洗澡这样的娱乐活动。那么后来呢，一直到18世纪末，思想才改变哦。不过后来有进步的医学，还有更好的水资源，所以其实我们平常大家都在沐浴，而公共的浴场还有温泉浴就重新开始了。我们明天还要带大家看看东方的浴场文化。明天准时收听，我是安娜，明天见。
Okay, everybody, that's it for today, but please join us again next time when we continue to talk about public baths and hot springs and all that fun stuff. Until then, from all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
See ya.